My mother's name's a story. My mother's name's a story. Michael Schaefer.
What's your earliest memory? Was it from a time when a pencil looked as big as this? Madam Contest Chair, esteemed dignitaries, and fellow Toastmasters, was your first memory a strong, emotional memory about an intense experience? Mine too, because it was all about food. Mexican food. I was 3.5 years old. It was Christmas Eve around midnight, and I can still remember in the dim blue light, the kitchen floor was covered in corn husks because my mom and her 2 sisters were making a big batch of Christmas tamales. Yeah. Oh, I can still smell the sweet corn and the rich spices. And my mom always told me, "Mijo, tamales mean I love you." And she told me, "It took me 2 days to make these things. You better clean your plate." I learned my lesson very well. Do you have a story that you'll always remember? Mom was mom to me, but she had a lot of names. She tells me her earliest memory is when she was 5 or 6 years old, back in the Depression. And the family was so poor, they had to pick cotton in Texas. And they lived in a cave. Really. Back then, her name was Bobby, because one day, her bossy older sister was teasing her about her size and said, "I'm not the Bobby, you're the Bobby." She couldn't pronounce the word baby. And it stuck. My mom is still the Bobby of her family. Later, my dad fell in love with Mom after she started using her confirmation name, Mary. And Dad loved how she dressed for the department store where they both worked. And he thought their names looked so perfect on the marriage certificate, John and Mary. And then, when I was 6 or 7 years old, one day I asked her about the gold letters on her matching set of luggage. There was an O, an E, and a T. And she said, "Oh, well, that stands for my real name." Her real name is Orale Espino Tarango. I know, doesn't it sound like something you say in Spanish when you stub your toe? Actually, in Latin, Oralia means golden. And that was the name she returned to after her 2 marriages had failed, and after she figured out that she couldn't be somebody that she wasn't. But the golden lining is, that's when she really started to live her life. It was Oralia who went back to school for massage. Oralia traveled to Paris and Hawaii. Oralia became a professional storyteller. She was no longer the shy younger sister or the over-accommodating wife. She has become Oralia Espino Tarango. See, the story of my mother's names is all about growth. In fact, she's my role model to never stop growing. I think secretly at heart, she's a Toastmaster. So what's your story? You know, you're the next chapter in your family history, so how's it going? Are you getting writer's cramp or writer's block? Everybody has a story. Sadly, my mom's story is in the middle of a tragic chapter. She's in late-stage Alzheimer's, around stage 6, if you know it. Our family figured out about 6 years ago at my wedding when Mom couldn't seem to find her hotel room. And now she lives in an assisted care facility, and there's a vacant look in her eyes a lot. And the final time she was tested last year, she couldn't even write her own name on a piece of paper. My mother is slowly, inevitably, unstoppably being erased in front of me. I'm so grateful that she told me her story. I'll remember it for her now. That's my job. Our legacy is carried physically in our genes, but our experience is passed on in our stories. Stories are the DNA of our wisdom. So what's the story you need to tell? Is it that legendary story about your great-grandfather? Or maybe it's a secret that you kept trapped inside too long. Or maybe it's a golden nugget of wisdom, a life lesson about your mother that you've had a burning desire to share, but you haven't had the guts to yet. If you don't tell your story, it dies with you. This Christmas, I picked up Mom to take her out to lunch, and she was so happy. The sun was shining, and she was pointing at the color of the sky and the trees, and I took her to our favorite restaurant, and I got her a nice plate of tamales. And she took one look at it, and she said, "Oh, what are these?" They meant nothing to her. But it's okay, because I'm perfecting Mom's recipe for tamales for my family. Tell your story. And my Toastmasters, if you remember my stories, I promise I will remember yours. And isn't that the way we write the book of life? Taking turns up here and out there, telling stories together. I've got a challenge for you. Ever since Mom started using her real name, people have had trouble pronouncing it. Some people say Aurelia. Some people say Orlia. Let's prove them all wrong tonight. The right way to say it is Auralia. Will you say it with me on the count of 3, please? 1, 2, 3. Auralia. Again. Auralia. Louder. Auralia. Thank you, fellow Toastmasters, for remembering my mother's story. Now, go tell yours.